Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story begins on a quiet evening that was supposed to be just like any other, but it turned into a moment that changed multiple lives forever. This is the story of a billionaire who returned home early and was completely stunned by what he saw. Alexander Hale was a man the world thought it knew. He was the kind of billionaire whose name appeared in business magazines, whose face showed up at charity galas, and whose success story was used as motivation in boardrooms across the globe. He had built an empire from nothing, or at least that's what the headlines said. What the headlines didn't talk about was how lonely that empire was, or how empty the massive glass mansion on the hill felt most nights. Alexander lived alone. Or at least, that's how it appeared. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away 5 years earlier after a sudden illness. They never had children, and after her death, Alexander buried himself in work. His days were filled with meetings, flights, and deals worth millions. His nights were silent, except for the occasional echo of memories he tried desperately to ignore. That evening, Alexander was supposed to be in another city, finalizing a merger that would have made him even wealthier. But the meeting ended hours earlier than expected. The board approved everything without resistance, and for once, Alexander didn't feel the urge to celebrate. Instead, a strange heaviness sat in his chest. Without telling anyone, he decided to return home early. As his car pulled through the long iron gates of his estate, something felt off. Lights were on inside the house. That wasn't unusual by itself, but Alexander knew his routines well. The staff usually kept only minimal lighting when he was away. He frowned slightly but dismissed the feeling, assuming someone simply forgot to turn them off. He stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes, and walked toward the front door. The moment he unlocked it and stepped inside, he heard laughter. Alexander froze. It wasn't the polite laughter of guests at a formal dinner. It wasn't the restrained chuckle of staff members speaking quietly. It was genuine, warm, unfiltered laughter. Children's laughter. His heart began to pound. He stood there, briefcase still in hand, listening. The sound came from the living room, the one room he almost never used. Slowly, cautiously, he walked toward it. With every step, confusion mixed with disbelief. He hadn't hosted guests in years. No children ever came here. Ever. When he reached the doorway, the sight before him made his breath catch in his throat. On the floor of his living room, surrounded by pillows and blankets, were 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all under the age of 10. They were laughing uncontrollably as they tried to build a tower out of books. First edition volumes he once guarded like treasure. Sitting among them was Maria, his longtime housekeeper, smiling in a way he had never seen before. Alexander felt as if the world had tilted. Maria noticed him first. Her smile vanished, and her face turned pale. She stood up immediately, hands trembling. The children followed her gaze, their laughter fading as they saw a tall stranger standing silently in the doorway. "Mr. Hale," Maria said softly, fear and guilt clear in her voice. You weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow." Alexander didn't respond right away. His eyes were fixed on the children. They stared back at him, unsure, curious, a little afraid. Something deep inside him stirred something he thought had died years ago. "Who are they?" he finally asked, his voice calm but heavy. Maria swallowed hard. They're my sister's children, my nieces and nephew." Alexander's brow furrowed. "Why are they here?" Maria hesitated, then took a deep breath, as if she had been holding this secret in for far too long. "My sister passed away 2 months ago," she said quietly. "There was no one else to take them. I couldn't afford proper housing yet, and I was afraid to ask for help. I bring them here after school while I work. I make sure they never enter your private spaces. I clean everything. I never thought you'd find out." The room was silent. Alexander looked around. The children had stopped playing completely. The little girl clutched one of the boy's hands. The other boy stood protectively in front of her, as if ready to defend his siblings from whatever might happen next. In that moment, Alexander could have reacted in many ways. He could have fired Maria on the spot. He could have called security. He could have reminded her of the strict rules he set years ago. Instead, something unexpected happened. He felt tears sting his eyes. For the first time in years, his house felt alive. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked gently. Maria looked down. "Almost 6 weeks, sir, and they've been sleeping here." "No," she said quickly. "Never overnight. I take them back to the small apartment we're staying in. This was only during my working hours." Alexander nodded slowly. He walked into the room, setting his briefcase down. The children tensed, but he knelt in front of them, bringing himself to their level. "What are your names?" he asked softly. The boy in front spoke first. "I'm Daniel." "I'm Lucas," said the second boy. "And I'm Sophia," the girl whispered. Alexander smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't worn in years. "I'm Alexander." The children relaxed slightly. That night, Alexander told Maria to sit down. He ordered food for everyone. Something casual, something warm. The children ate hungrily, laughing again as the initial fear faded. Alexander watched them, quietly observing how they shared, how they argued and made up within seconds, how alive they were. Later that evening, after the children had fallen asleep on the couch, Alexander spoke to Maria privately. "You should have told me," he said, not unkindly. "I was afraid," Maria admitted, tears in her eyes. "I didn't want to lose my job. This is all I have." Alexander nodded. "I understand fear more than you think." The next morning, everything changed. Alexander canceled all his meetings. He arranged for the children to be enrolled in a nearby private school. He upgraded Maria's living situation, moving her and the children into a comfortable home not far from the estate. He told her it was temporary, but deep down, he knew nothing about this was temporary. Weeks passed, and Alexander found himself coming home earlier every day. He started having dinner with the children. He helped them with homework, listened to their stories, attended their school events quietly. Sitting in the back row, like an ordinary man, the staff noticed the change. Immediately, the mansion that once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, footsteps, and life. Alexander started sleeping better. He smiled more. He actually laughed when Sophia painted his hand pink during an art project, or when Daniel insisted, "Alexander, watch him score a goal at soccer practice." One evening, Lucas asked a question that made the room go still. "Mr. Alexander," he said, "do you have kids?" Alexander paused. "No," he replied honestly. "Why not?" He took a deep breath. "Sometimes, life doesn't go the way we plan." Lucas thought about this, then nodded. "Well, you're really good with us." That night, Alexander cried alone in his room, holding a photo of Eleanor. For the first time, the tears weren't just from pain. They were mixed with something else, hope. Months later, Alexander made a decision that shocked everyone. He began the legal process to adopt the children. Maria protested at first, overwhelmed with emotion. "They're my responsibility," she said. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness." Alexander looked at her and said, "This isn't charity. This is family." The adoption process wasn't easy. There were investigations, interviews, and long nights of doubt. Alexander questioned himself constantly. Was he too old, too busy, too broken? But every doubt disappeared the moment he saw the children running toward him after school, calling his name, their faces lighting up when they saw him. 1 year after that unexpected early return home, Alexander hosted a small gathering in his once empty living room. No reporters, no business partners, just family, friends, and laughter. Maria stood beside him, tears streaming down her face as the judge finalized the adoption papers. Daniel, Lucas, and Sophia were officially his children. Alexander knelt in front of them, voice shaking. "I don't know if I'll be perfect," he said, "but I promise I'll always show up." Sophia hugged him tightly. "That's all we need." In that moment, Alexander realized something profound. All the money, all the success, all the power he had accumulated meant nothing compared to this. Coming home early that night didn't just surprise him, it saved him. The billionaire who once measured life in profits and losses now measured it in bedtime stories, school drawings taped to the fridge, and small hands holding his and every night, as he turned off the lights in a house that finally felt like a home, Alexander whispered a quiet thank you for the meeting that ended early, for the laughter he overheard, and for the family he never knew he was missing. If this story moved you, remember, sometimes the biggest miracles happen when plans change and we arrive early to a moment meant to transform us.